Durbin. On his vote, the ayes are 20, the nays are 1.
Nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. Next is Sarah Russell, nominated to the District of Connecticut. If no one seeks recognition, the clerk will
Mr.
call.
Chairman.
Senator Cruz.
Mr. Chairman, this is the final nominee I intend to speak on. Sarah Russell, before this committee, failed to disclose a 2020 letter to the Connecticut governor that she signed, claiming she had no memory of this letter from just 3 years ago. It's easy to see why she would want to forget this letter. The letter was on its face extreme, and in any normal administration, this letter would be disqualifying to serve as a federal judge. The letter demanded that, due to COVID, the governor of Connecticut should, quote, immediately release to the maximum extent possible people incarcerated pre-trial and post-conviction. In other words, let everyone out, pre-trial and post-conviction. That's everyone. But just as importantly as what the letter says about releasing criminals, it's what it doesn't say. There's nothing in her letter that would limit the release to certain classes of criminals. There's nothing that says nonviolent offenders. She's calling for the release of murderers. She's calling for the release of rapists. She's calling for the release of pedophiles and sex traffickers and child pornographers, all of them, to the maximum extent possible, should be released into the community. The letter also demands, quote, a moratorium on new admissions into jails and prisons. You can be an axe murderer in Connecticut, but she wants a moratorium on new admissions into jails and prisons. This nominee wanted the governor to stop arresting people for committing crimes. I don't know if the plan was to nicely ask criminals, would you please stop murdering people? Please stop dealing drugs until COVID goes away? Or if the plan was just to give violent criminals a stern talking to and hope they will behave differently. In any event, this position is extreme. I look around this committee room. Many of you represent blue states with a lot of liberals as your citizens. I do not know a single state. Illinois, Rhode Island, none of the states here. Connecticut, the people of Connecticut would be horrified to know that a woman who signed a letter calling on the governor to release violent criminals into their community is now going to be a federal judge with the power to release violent criminals into their community. This is not mainstream. This is extreme, and yet this is who President Biden has nominated, and this is who Senate Democrats, like the Politburo, line up and vote for. Not a one of you. There is not a state liberal enough that your citizens would be happy. Why did you vote to confirm a judge who called on releasing criminals and rapists and child predators into our communities? That's what she signed, and that is not a position that any reasonable person would want to give her the power to execute on what she advocated. And so I urge the White House to withdraw this nominee, and I urge this committee to reject this nominee.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's nothing new here. This committee has already heard these allegations and more, and I would just make a couple of quick points. I know we have a full agenda. First of all, this nominee is extraordinarily well qualified as a scholar, a litigator, a teacher over decades. And that's the reason why the people of Connecticut do strongly support her nomination and why President Biden commendably has nominated her. There's nothing here that's been said by my colleague from Texas or anyone else on this committee that detracts from her qualifications. As to this letter, Sarah Russell has disavowed the views in it. She has told this committee that signing it was a mistake. It was overbroad. She didn't write it. She didn't edit it. She doesn't agree with its views. And maybe I'm the only one on this committee, but there are a few letters I've signed that I look back and said, gee, maybe not such a good idea. She was among 1,500 endorsing individuals for a letter that she now acknowledges was overbroad. And she has said, most importantly to this committee, that none of those views would impact her sentencing of defendants or any other actions she would take on the bench. There are a lot of Republican nominees who have had to disavow past views. I could list them, but they include, for example, Kenneth Lee, nominated to the Ninth Circuit, Wendy Vitter to the District of Louisiana, others who have had to supplement their records, Naomi Rao, Amy Coney Barrett. It happens, and we know it happens. And often there are letters or articles or other kinds of documents that have to be provided afterward. Ms. Russell disclosed 4,700 pages of records. She missed this one letter, and it encompasses 3 substantive pages. I submit to my colleague she is eminently qualified, and I suggest an affirmative vote.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar. Aye. Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Hirono. Aye. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff.
Aye.
Mr. Welch. Ms. Butler. Mr. Graham.
No by proxy.
Mr. Grassley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cruz.
No.
Mr. Hawley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cotton.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy.
The nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. Next is Mustafa Kasubhai, nominated to the District of Oregon. Does anyone seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cruz?
Mr. Chairman, I've spoken about this nominee in the past, and there's a pattern when Democrats have problematic nominees, ones that would be embarrassing if their support for those nominees were widely publicized. They do what they're doing today, which is they flood the zone with nominees and they pack the objectionable ones in the middle, hoping no one notices. Well, Mustafa Kasubhai is a particularly extreme nominee. President Biden has nominated his fair share of wild leftists, but it's not often that one has such a clear track record of, among other things, advocating for Marxist outcomes. Judge Kasubhai has previously advocated for, quote, the integration of Marxist theory into the American economic system, and he has argued for a creative struggle to, quote, redefine property. He's not even bothering to hide his radicalism. And by the way, my colleague Senator Booker accused Republicans of McCarthyism, even if he wasn't sure if it was Eugene, Joe, or Kevin. But I would note that when I said Democrats are behaving as the Russian Politburo, I was not calling you communists. I was instead pointing to action. What did the Politburo do? It behaved like docile sheep doing whatever dear leader required. Your behaviors can refute the Politburo by having one Democrat vote no on one nominee, but none of you will. You all will do. You behave like the Politburo, which is why I said you behave like the Politburo. And here you have an instance to do so, to decide whether or not you want to vote for a nominee who has advocated for Marxism. Now, that's your choice. But if you always follow the orders of the White House, no matter how extreme the nominee is, then you shouldn't be surprised when you're compared to the Politburo, because that's what the Politburo did. I will also point out that Judge Kasubhai has required litigants who come before him to refer to one another by their preferred pronouns and pressured party to include their gender pronouns on their signature block. Now, I've litigated cases in front of a lot of judges. I've never seen a judge do this anywhere in the country, and it gives you a sense of just how extreme and radical this is. He's going to impose his ideology on you. If you're a litigant, you will knuckle under to this extreme ideology. He also proclaimed that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is the heart and soul of the court system. In fact, he went on to say, can we say that? Yeah, I just did, and I'm saying it proudly. Senator Booker, who is my friend, who I work with quite a bit, said that all of the Democrats are horrified by what's happening on college campuses. I wish that were a true statement. But I don't see Democrats speaking up, taking on the anti-Semitism at college campuses, taking on the DEI that is resulting in Jewish students feeling persecuted because radicals treat Jews as oppressors and treat Hamas terrorists as victims. I certainly don't want federal judges making decisions on the basis of race or vague expressions of leftist ideology. There's a reason that Lady Justice is blind, because a judge is not supposed to show prejudice or preference one way or the other for any race, for any religion. A judge is supposed to follow the law. And finally, what was particularly concerning was Judge Kasubhai's actions during the violent riots we saw all across the country in 2020. When Portland, Oregon suffered months of violence at the hands of Antifa rioters, specifically singling out the Marco Hatfield federal courthouse for attack, for 60 days, 6-0, radicals laid siege to a federal courthouse, attempting to set it on fire, throwing Molotov cocktails, fighting federal officers, injuring law enforcement officers day after day after day, even using lasers to permanently damage the eyes of some of the officers. Well, the city of Eugene saw what was happening in Portland and tried to prevent that from happening in Eugene, Oregon. But Eugene is where Judge Kasubhai presided. The city of Eugene sought to enforce a curfew to prevent similar violence in Eugene. And what did Judge Kasubhai do? He blocked it. Not only did he block it, he retaliated against the city manager that enacted the curfew and the police chief that enforced the curfew. He denied them qualified immunity, in essence throwing them to the wolves to be sued for trying to protect the citizens of Eugene, Oregon, and keep them safe. If you want to know whether the federal judge is going to stand with violent mobs or the citizens, you can look to this case and decide. And if you want to know whether the Senate Democrats are going to stand with the violent mobs of the citizens, you can look to their vote in just a moment and see as well. And again, that is not by association, my friend. That is your actions. When you say the word "I" over and over and over again, no matter the record, your actions are defining what you're doing. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, he invoked my name. I hate to slow things up, but he did not, to the record, he clarified that he's not calling us communists. He's calling all Democrats docile sheep. This from a guy who's afraid to face me in basketball since we've gotten here. I will quote to you simply from one of my toxic masculinity heroes, Mark Wayne Mullen. I quote, "Anytime, any place, cowboy."
The quote from that same senator, "Now's the time, now's the place." Where's Bernie asking us to settle down?
Sorry, we have a flood of nominees. Next is Mustafa Kasubhai, nominated District of Oregon. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal. Aye. Ms. Sharona. Aye. Mr. Booker.
Aye.
Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff.
Aye.
Mr. Welch. Aye. Butler. Aye. Mr. Graham.
No by proxy.
Mr. Grassley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cruz.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cotton,
No by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy,
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis,
No by proxy.
Mrs. Blackburn,
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair Durbin, on this vote, the ayes are 11, the nays are 10.
Nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. Next is Edward Kiel, nominated to the District of New Jersey. Anyone seek recognition? If not, the clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Whitehouse.
Aye.
Ms. Klobuchar.
Aye.
Mr. Cruz.
Aye.
Mr. Blumenthal.
Aye.
Ms. Sorono. Mr. Booker. Mr. Padilla.
Aye.
Mr. Ossoff.
You sure you want
Mr.
that?
Welch. Ms.
Sure you want
Butler.
that chair?
Mr. Graham.
No by proxy.
Mr. Grassley.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cornyn.
No.
Mr. Lee.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cruz.
No.
Mr. Holly.
No by proxy.
Mr. Cotton.
No by proxy.
Mr. Kennedy.
No by proxy.
Mr. Tillis.
No by proxy.
Mrs. Blackburn.
No by proxy.
Chair Durbin.
Aye.
Chair Durbin, on this vote, the ayes are 11, the nays are 10.
The nomination will be favorably reported to the floor. Next is Yumi Lee to the Northern District.
Big Bird, as you can see, we've been joined by Senator Cupid Stunt. Can you just show us how you can be the adult after the silly tweet they sent you?
You can send somebody a virtual hug. How about that?
Big Bird, as always, Senator Cupid Stunt doesn't seem to take anything anyone says, which is wise, seriously. Changing subject again, let's conclude. We have some video of Senator Cupid Stunt trying to dance. Big Bird, you like to dance, yes?
Well, Tony, you have to get up and move. Yeah, so Abby and I, we have virtual dance parties together, and we have a lot of fun. We just kind of move and shake.